Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a stack of pretty challenging Australian research, really digging into the attitudes of boys and young men, especially around gender and respect. We're tackling a big contradiction that's kind of hiding in the data. You know, if you're like a lot of people, you probably assume that younger generations, Gen Z, are just naturally more progressive on gender stuff than, say, their parents. Well, this deep dive might feel like a bit of a cold shower. The data isn't just challenging that idea. In some ways, it's actually flipping it on its head. There's a real knowledge gap here we need to address.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, our goal isn't about pointing fingers or shaming anyone. It's about identifying this really specific kind of rigid social script that boys feel pressured to follow. We need to connect the dots, you know? Between the stats showing this backward slide in attitudes and its root cause, what researchers call the harmful script. And then really importantly, look at the evidence-based antidote. What actually works to counter it?
Okay, let's start with something that sounds like good news, but maybe masks the real issue. Surveys show the vast majority of Australians, like 97%, totally reject the idea that men should joke about violence towards women. That sounds pretty clear-cut, right?
It does sound like it, but that rejection of really explicit violence, it kind of hides a softer, maybe more widespread tolerance for the attitudes underneath, the stuff that lets a culture of disrespect grow. And the sources show exactly where that tolerance pops up. Like nearly a quarter of Australians, 24%, they still think telling sexist jokes causes no harm, which seems small, but it kind of gives social permission, you know, normalizes objectification, that whole locker room talk thing. And maybe even more concerning, a third of Australians, 33%, believe it's just, well, natural for a man to want to look like he's in control of his partner when his mates are around.
Right, okay. Now let's pivot to that generational piece. The Gen Z regression. This is where it gets really counterintuitive. That belief about male control. It's not fading out with younger guys. It's actually more common among young men aged 16 to 24.
Yeah, it's startling.
Get this. 35% of young men in that age group believe women actually prefer a man to be in charge of the relationship.
Yeah.
That's way higher than older groups.
Right.
It's going the wrong way.
It is. And the 2024 Gender Equality Report Card really nails this down. It gives us the definitive split. So among young women, 16 to 24, you've got 43% rejecting those attitudes that fuel gender inequality.
Okay.
But among young men the same age, it's only 20%. That's a 23-point gap. And it's not closing. It seems to be widening. That's a huge difference in how the newest generation of adults are thinking.
So why? Why is this actually happening? This doesn't feel like just normal cultural drift.
No, and you've hit on the key thing. We have to look at the massive amplifier here. The whole digital world, the online ecosystem, that's the critical context. Researchers, educators, they're directly linking this measurable step backward to the huge influence of the online manosphere. And, you know, those high-profile misogynistic manfluencers. This isn't some moral panic. It's documented. It's an active shift. These young men are plugged into a really effective 204/7 algorithm, basically a curriculum that's manufacturing and reinforcing these really rigid gender ideas. And it's doing it faster than schools or families can maybe counter it.
Okay, so the manosphere is the amplifier. It's selling this toxic version of masculinity. But what exactly is the script it's selling? We need a way to understand this pressure. And the sources keep coming back to one core idea. The man box.
The man box, yeah. That's the key theoretical framework. It's basically a set of rigid, socially enforced rules about how to be a real man. Australian research, particularly from Jesuit Social Services, defines it almost like a behavioral prison, policed by peer groups. And the manosphere just digitizes that and, frankly, weaponizes those rules.
What are those rules? Like the core tenets?
Well, the main ones are real men have to act tough, be aggressive. They shouldn't cry or show emotions except maybe anger. They need to be totally self-sufficient, handle everything alone. And crucially, they have to assert dominance and control, especially in relationships with women.
Okay. And what makes this man box framework so powerful, so essential for understanding this? It's the data connecting it to actual harm, right?
Exactly. The research draws a really shocking, quantifiable line between believing in this script and doing harm.
What does that look like in numbers?
Okay, get ready for this. Men who most strongly agreed with these rigid man box views, they were 17 times more likely to report having hit their partner.
17 times.
And 20 times more likely to say they'd sexually harassed a woman.
Wow.
The link between these rigid ideas about manhood and violence, it's just undeniable in the data.
But it's not just harm to others, is it? That's the really crucial pivot in this narrative.
That's right. And this is why the framework is so useful for actually helping. The very same script that fuels outward violence. It's also incredibly destructive to the person inside the box.
How so?
The same men who scored high on the man box scale, they were 8 times more likely to have had suicidal thoughts almost every day.
8 times?
Yeah. And twice as likely to binge drink. 6 times more likely to show signs of problem gambling.
So it's like a unified theory of harm. This script, this box, it's a prison that harms everyone. The people outside, yes, but also the inmate themselves.
Precisely.
And that feels like the key insight for finding a way forward. The work to stop violence against women and the work to boost men's mental health, they're actually the same job, aren't they?
Fundamentally, yes. Both are about dismantling this structure, this man box, that demands men suppress their emotions and disconnect.
That's a really powerful idea. So if the man box is the problem, the disease, then the solution has to be about actively changing that script, offering a better alternative.
Exactly. The most effective approaches are what we call gender transformative. They don't just say, don't do this. They actively challenge the rigid ideas and replace them with something healthier.
It's about calling boys in to something better, not just calling them out or shaming them.
That's the goal. We need a positive, evidence-based, like a new operating system for manhood. And the sources highlight a really groundbreaking Australian approach, the +M model. The +M model. It comes from Origin, the National Center of Excellence in Youth Mental Health. Think of it as the blueprint for positive masculinity.
Okay, +M, what does it involve? What does it build?
It focuses on dismantling those man box rules by developing 3 core strengths. First, being connected. This means building respectful relationships, focusing on open communication, real empathy, which totally contradicts that man box rule about having to be completely self-sufficient.
Right, so connection instead of isolation. That makes sense. What's the second pillar?
Being authentic. This is about acting compassionately toward yourself and towards other people. It directly challenges that toxic rule that says men have to hide vulnerability, suppress all feelings except anger. It gives permission to just be a complex feeling human.
Permission to be human. I like that. And the third pillar. This sounds like the direct counter to that pressure for dominance we see online.
It really is. The third pillar is being motivated. But motivated by what? Motivated to be a good person, to contribute positively to your community, to society, rather than just acting out of peer pressure or trying to gain status through aggression or control.
Okay, so connected, authentic, motivated, that's the +M framework. But how does this translate from theory into actual practice? Where is this happening successfully?
Good question. Because theory is one thing, right? We need to see it working on the ground. And there are leading organizations doing exactly that, taking this model into communities, like the Man Cave. They're a preventative mental health charity. Their whole focus is creating these psychologically safe spaces for boys, places where they can actually talk about their feelings, their struggles, without worrying about being judged or shut down by their peers.
Which directly fights that man box rule of deal with it alone.
Exactly. And their data shows it works. It's pretty compelling. 95% of the boys say the workshop had a positive impact. And maybe even more importantly, 90% say they have greater trust in their friends afterwards. That move towards connection, away from isolation, it's huge.
90% trusting friends more. That's significant.
Then you've got groups like Tomorrow Man and Tomorrow Architects. They take this work right into schools, obviously, but also, crucially, into sporting clubs.
Right into the heart of where lad culture can be strongest.
Yeah. Precisely. If you really want to disrupt those old, outdated stereotypes about masculinity, you have to go where those man box rules are often most heavily enforced. They're deliberately going into those environments to make it okay, even normal, to talk about emotions, to show vulnerability among guys.
And Jesuit Social Services, the group that helped define the man box, are they involved in solutions too?
They are. They run the Modeling Respect and Equality program or more. It's a really smart train the trainer approach. They equip the people who interact with boys every day, teachers, coaches, youth workers, those key role models, with the tools to challenge man box attitudes in their normal interactions.
So it scales up the impact. It's not just one workshop, it's embedding it into daily life.
Exactly. It makes challenging those norms a constant, subtle pressure in the right direction. And what all these programs really confirm is this. You champion a framework that builds resilience, connection, emotional literacy. You end up tackling the crisis in male mental health and the crisis of violence prevention at the exact same time. They are linked. That's the leverage point.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've seen this pretty alarming regression among Gen Z men's attitudes. We've identified the man box as this toxic root cause driving harm outwards and inwards, but we've also found this clear, positive, liberating alternative in the plus M framework.
Yeah, and I think the final thought we have to leave you with is this. This problem, these rigid ideas about gender, they aren't just fading away passively with time. That's not happening. It's being actively manufactured. It's being amplified by really sophisticated algorithms feeding that manosphere ideology straight to young men constantly, 24/7.
It's an active effort we're up against.
It is. We have these powerful evidence-based tools like Plus M that genuinely offer liberation, better relationships, better mental health. But these positive models are in direct competition with the manosphere's curriculum, which is designed for high engagement, often through anger and grievance. It makes money that way.
So the challenge
For you to think about is, how do we make sure the liberation narrative wins? What steps can you take, in your world as a parent, maybe a coach, a teacher, just a member of the community, to help push back against the harmful script and champion the healthier one? How do we help the Plus M story win that competition?